In May 1942, Lieutenant Commander Jimmy Thach watched as his wingman's Wildcat disintegrated. American pilots were caught in dogfights they couldn't win. Thach had known this moment was coming. An intelligence report from September 1941 revealed the Japanese Zero could outturn, outclimb, and outmaneuver every aircraft in the Navy's inventory. American fighter tactics were worse than useless against the Zero. They were suicide. The simple, brutal math showed that in a turning fight, the Zero could complete its turn and get guns on target while the slower Wildcat was still trying to come around. The intelligence bulletin, marked Eyes Only, arrived on September 22, 1941. It detailed the Mitsubishi 6M0's seemingly impossible specifications: a rate of climb of 5,000 feet per minute, an impossibly tight turning radius, a maximum speed of 330 miles per hour, and a combat range of 1,200 miles. Every single specification exceeded the American F-4F Wildcat. Thach, commanding Fighting Squadron 3, realized his pilots would be at a disadvantage in every traditional dogfight. Determined to find a solution, Thach took the report home to Coronado. Late that evening, he pulled out a box of matchsticks on his kitchen table. Each stick represented a fighter, and he began moving them, simulating attacks and defenses, searching for a formation that might give his pilots a chance. Night after night, Thach moved the matchsticks, filling notebooks with diagrams. Everything he tried failed. Mutual support formations were picked apart by the Zero's maneuverability. Spreading out allowed the Zero to engage individually. Traditional maneuvers like the defensive circle were death traps. The existing Navy doctrine assumed parity between fighters. With the Zero's superiority, every standard tactic collapsed. Thach was trying to find a formation that would let inferior aircraft defeat superior ones through teamwork alone. Then, in October 1941, 2 months before Pearl Harbor, the pattern clicked. He positioned 2 matchsticks side by side, separated by about 1,500 feet, which was roughly equal to the Wildcat's turning radius. When a Zero attacked one fighter, that pilot would turn toward his wingman, who simultaneously turned toward his partner. The 2 Wildcats would cross paths, weaving back and forth like scissors. Any Zero following one Wildcat would find itself flying head-on toward the second Wildcat. The pursuing Japanese pilot faced a terrible choice: continue the attack and face head-on gunfire, or break off and lose the target. If the Zero turned to attack the second Wildcat, the maneuver repeated. The Wildcats would cross again and again, forcing the Zero to stay constantly defensive. The formation turned the Zero's superior turning ability into a liability. Thach needed to test it. In early 1942, he called on his best pilot, Ensign Edward Butch O'Hare, who would later become America's first ace and earn the Medal of Honor. Thach took 3 other Wildcats up for defense, positioning them in the new formation, while O'Hare led 4 Wildcats as attackers. O'Hare, a gifted pilot, was told to press his attacks aggressively. They climbed to 15,000 feet over San Diego. O'Hare set up an attack on the tail of one of Thach's fighters, but as the targeted pilot turned toward his wingman, O'Hare found himself staring at the nose of the second Wildcat. He broke off, tried a different angle and a high-side attack, but the weave countered them all. After 20 minutes, O'Hare landed, frustrated but excited, saying, "Skipper, it really worked. I couldn't make any attack without seeing the nose of one of your airplanes pointed at me. The formation worked in theory and practice against friendly aircraft, but the real test would be against actual Zeros." Thach drilled his squadron relentlessly, emphasizing that timing and coordination were everything, requiring pilots to turn simultaneously and trust each other completely. The weave required subordinating individual initiative to team coordination, a shift from traditional fighter tactics, but Thach knew they had no choice. The F-6X Hellcat and F-4U Corsair were a year away from service, and until then, the weave was their only chance in inferior aircraft. On June 4, 1942, during the Battle of Midway, Thach led 6 Wildcats escorting Torpedo Squadron 3. They were protecting 12 slow, obsolete Douglas Devastator torpedo bombers. Zeros swarmed the bombers, quickly shooting down 10 of the 12. Thach's 6 fighters were hopelessly outnumbered, facing 15 to 20 Zeros. After one Wildcat went down, Thach called to his wingman, Ensign Robert Dibb, and positioned the remaining 5 fighters for the weave. Lieutenant Brainerd Macomber stayed glued to Thach's wing. The Zeros pressed their attack, and then the impossible happened. The weave worked exactly as designed on the kitchen table. A Zero locked onto Dibb's tail. Dibb turned toward Thach, and Thach turned into him. The 2 Wildcats crossed paths, and Thach dove under Dibb's fighter, firing into the Zero's belly as it flashed past. The Japanese fighter ignited and rolled away. The Zeros kept attacking, but the weave forced them defensive every time. Thach and Dibb wove back and forth, with Macomber precisely maintaining the formation. Thach shot down 3 Zeros in less than 10 minutes, and Dibb got 1. The other Wildcats survived despite being outnumbered 4 to 1. The matchstick tactic had worked in the deadliest combat of the Pacific War.
Thach's report on the weave's effectiveness spread quickly through the Navy. Pilots, previously terrified of the Zero, suddenly had a fighting chance. The formation didn't make the Wildcats superior, but neutralized the Zero's advantages through teamwork. Critically, the weave required no radio communication, which was invaluable in the chaos of combat. Pilots could execute it through simple visual signals. When your wingman turned toward you, you turned toward him. James Flatley, who tested it, renamed it the Thach Weave, and the name stuck. By August 1942, the weave was standard doctrine for Navy squadrons, and Marine pilots on Guadalcanal immediately adopted it. The Japanese reacted with confusion and frustration. Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's highest-scoring aces, wrote about encountering the famous double-team maneuver over Guadalcanal, noting that his skilled commander, Lieutenant Commander Tadashi Nakajima, was forced to break off his attack and dive for safety. The psychological impact was significant. Japanese pilots had to approach American formations more cautiously, reducing their aggression. The weave worked because it changed the geometry of combat, making every engagement 2-on-1, which favored the coordinated Americans. By late 1942, the weave was taught to new pilots during training. It saved hundreds, possibly thousands of American lives before superior fighters like the Hellcat and Corsair entered service. The Army Air Forces also adopted the weave for their P-38 Lightning and P-40 Warhawk fighters in the Pacific, finding that the principle of mutual support translated across different aircraft. Even after superior American fighters arrived, the weave remained core tactic, incorporated into the doctrine of F-6F Hellcat and F-4U Corsair squadrons. Its effectiveness relied on coordination and discipline, not the superiority of the aircraft. The weave was used in every theater of World War II, against German and Japanese fighters. After the war, the Thach weave became foundational doctrine for fighter aviation worldwide. Air forces studied it as an example of tactical innovation overcoming equipment disadvantages. The weave was still being taught and used during the Vietnam War, with F-4 Phantom pilots using it against North Vietnamese MiG fighters. The basic principle remained sound. 2 fighters working together were more than twice as effective as 2 fighters working alone. John Thach retired from the Navy in 1967 as a full admiral after 40 years of pioneering tactical innovations. He is best remembered for the matchsticks, for the nights spent searching for a formation that would keep his pilots alive. The weave was born from desperation, developed through methodical analysis, and proven in combat. It demonstrated that equipment superiority matters, but tactics and training matter more. The Zero was objectively superior to the Wildcat, yet American pilots using the weave fought Zeros to a standstill and often won. Thatch understood that you don't need the best equipment to win, but the best tactics for the equipment you have. He didn't complain about the Zero's advantages. He sat down with matchsticks and figured out how to win anyway. The Thatch Weave's legacy extends beyond its tactical effectiveness. It represents the principle that innovation can come from anywhere, even a kitchen table in Coronado, and that systematic analysis can solve seemingly insurmountable problems. Thatch developed the weave months before Pearl Harbor, based on intelligence about an enemy aircraft most Americans had never heard of. When the war came, his pilots were ready with a life-saving tactic. Today, fighter pilots worldwide still study the Thatch Weave. Modern aircraft fight differently, but the underlying principle remains valid. Coordinated teamwork defeats individual superiority. The F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II, the most advanced fighters, still use formations derived from Thatch's innovation. Pilots practice mutual support maneuvers that trace their lineage directly back to those matchsticks moving across a kitchen table in 1941. John Thatch died in 1981, and a frigate, the USS Thatch, was commissioned in his honor. But his greatest monument is the tactic itself, still being taught 80 years after he invented it. The Thatch Weave proved that superior thinking beats superior equipment, that teamwork defeats individual skill, and that the right tactic at the right time can change the course of war. All because one naval officer refused to accept that his pilots were doomed. Instead of despairing over the Zero's superiority, he bought a box of matchsticks and went to work, moving those small wooden sticks until he found the pattern that would save thousands of lives. The next time you face an impossible problem, remember John Thatch and his matchsticks. The answer might not be better resources or superior equipment. Sometimes the answer is already on the table in front of you. You just need to arrange it correctly.